Welcome to the intersection of city politics and everyday life. I'm Brian Lehrer. An historic day here in New York City and across the country. Holding signs like "Am I next?" and "How many more?" Tens of thousands of students left their classrooms today to protest gun violence and demand stricter gun controls. Some marched, some stood in witness for 17 minutes, 1 minute for each student and teacher shot down in Parkland, Florida, 1 month ago today. The chant, "No more silence, stop gun violence," was heard, and here in New York, this too. Boycott the NRA, they were chanting. It was young people in Parkland who began this new challenge to the pro-gun forces shortly after their friends were killed. Now the movement is nationwide. They have set a Washington March for Our Lives, as they call it, a week from Saturday, on the 24th. Protests will also take place that day in other cities, including here in New York. To tell us about today's actions, how they organize, how they think about this issue, and future plans are Zoe Davidson, a co-founder and executive director of Coalition Z, a national youth activist network that launched after the presidential inauguration in 2017. Zoe is an 11th grade student at the Dalton School in Manhattan. Yasmeen Vargas is a college freshman and recent alum of Reaction. That's an anti-gun violence education program of the group New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. And Kristine Arroyo is here. She is program director for the Reaction Youth Education Program. She herself was a student in that program 10 years ago, lobbying against the NRA in Albany.
What I said 8 years ago as a Reaction student hasn't changed.
I was in Albany last year. We all had our New Yorkers Against Gun Violence shirts, and we had like buttons, and the NRA was there, which is the National Rifle Association. They said some comments like, "What do you guys know? You guys need to be educated on the Second Amendment."
We just lost a friend on Saturday. He got shot 3 times for no reason. We had people who came to us who said that we need to be educated. We don't need to be educated because we are here today to educate people that don't understand the meaning of gun violence. That's why we're here, because we lived it.
And here she is. Hi, Kristine.
Hi.
You get the first word.
Oh.
How did today feel, considering how long you've been at this, and with that flashback to 2008?
I think it's such an admiring experience. It actually took me back in flashbacks of like when I was protesting 10 years ago and using the platform of talking about people of color in our communities and how, you know, it's an everyday situation that we have to live with around gun violence. And it's so inspiring to see like my Reaction students take over and protest their rights and really say enough is enough.
Is it more inspiring or more depressing that here you are 10 years later and you're still asking for the same things?
You know, it could be depressing. It definitely is depressing to still be here at this moment, but I just feel like at the same time it's inspiring because it's a youth-led movement, and it's more youth going around nationwide advocating for justice in gun violence prevention, as they should, because they should have safety in their schools and in their communities.
And I guess we should acknowledge that really in a way you won, because if you were lobbying in Albany against the NRA, New York State has passed most of the things that everybody's now lobbying for nationwide. A ban on assault weapons, a ban on the big magazines that can fire so many bullets without reloading, and some other things, background checks, more universal, right?
Yeah, I mean, we still have a problem on the federal level, but definitely, you know, New York State has strong gun laws, and I'm very lucky to be a New Yorker because we do believe, you know, on gun control and safety for the younger generation.
Zoe, Coalition Z. Was it named after you?
I get that question a lot, but no, it was named after Generation Z. So that's my generation, the generation before the millennials, and we wanted the
Or after the millennials,
yes,
right?
excuse me, yeah. And we wanted the name to reflect that this is a student movement and that students can be involved in politics regardless of whether or not they can vote.
So you're the actual current high school student on our panel. Where were you at 10 o'clock this morning when the 17-minute walkout took place?
I was out on the streets. I was with about 400 of my peers walking around our block and protesting for an end to gun violence. It was an incredibly powerful moment. We were chanting some of the slogans that you showed earlier, and it was a really, I think, a fantastic moment for our community because we felt that our opinions were echoed in that of our peers, and sort of our desire to want to see stricter gun control was so much supported by that community.
And I guess your administration was supportive. Nobody, like some schools in our area, not most, but a few, people were being suspended or people were being given detention if they walked out today.
Yeah, no, we had the incredible privilege of having the support of our administration, which really made the event go very smoothly. But I have been working with students where they haven't had that same privilege, and it has been challenging.
You have? Can you tell us a story about somebody like that? Do you know any specifics?
Yeah, so we had one student who was who had a fire drill scheduled for the same time as their walkout, and they were trying to navigate whether or not they could turn that fire drill into a protest. And what we said to them was, walk out with signs when they pull the fire alarm, start chanting. Don't just let it turn into their event. And they ended up being able to work with their administration and figure out a better solution. But we have had to workshop problems like that.
And Yasmeen, you're a freshman in college now,
Yeah.
a SUNY freshman. But where were you at 10 o'clock this morning?
I was with my old high school with Chris, and I stood there with everyone, and we were holding up posters, and it was amazing to see the kids who I saw last year as a senior just participating and being there together, and also having economics and finance step in, because there's a bit of a rivalry between both the schools.
That's a
They're next to
school,
each
School
other.
of Economics and Finance.
Yeah. So the fact that both of us just joined together and were chanting everything in unison was just incredible.
Where was that physically? Where did that take place?
It was in Zuccotti Park. Yeah.
Downtown in Lower Manhattan.
Yeah, so right near Wall Street and in that area, right next to where the Freedom Tower is,
So did you have dignitaries show up and stuff like that?
There was police there, but they were there for us. There wasn't really much, I guess, people protesting against us.
Yeah, no, I guess I heard Governor Cuomo was going to be
Yeah.
at that location today.
Yeah, Governor Cuomo was definitely there. There was a lot of media press all over, and I was very happy that the students chose Zuccotti Park because Wall Street is a major place where a lot of companies are funding gun manufacturers. So just to hear the youth scream out enough is enough in Zuccotti Park, where probably in Wall Street, where all the people are funding the gun manufacturers, it was definitely a powerful statement.
Zoe, is the Parkland shooting something that changed the conversation, even at Dalton in New York City, or was this conversation going on already at all at your school?
Well, for me, I come from a community in which I'm privileged not to have to deal with gun violence on a daily basis, and so I think that this shooting really was an eye-opener for a lot of students that I've been talking to who don't have these experiences on a daily basis. And I think that what was perhaps even more eye-opening than the fact that there was this incredible violence at a high school, much like many of my peers, it was just how much students were taking a leadership role in this struggle. And I think that for students, it's often so frustrating because it feels like politicians won't listen since we don't have a vote. But for the first time in a long time, it feels as if we are being heard, and that even if we aren't registered to vote, we will soon be, and that has tremendous power.
Did you have a little mini registration drive as part of what you did? Because I know some seniors who are turning 18 and being able to vote this year did that in some schools.
At an event I'm planning tonight, we're going to be registering voters. And my My group, Coalition Z, has spent a lot of time doing voter registration. We help out schools host voter registration drives. We have a partnership with the Campaign Finance Board, and we also go to Albany in the spring to lobby for more comprehensive voting rights.
Yasmeen, what changed in the conversation as far as you can tell after Parkland? Like Zoe was talking about being at a very privileged school, by and large, different questions sometimes than kids who come from more, lower income backgrounds, a lot of kids of color who maybe face a different kind of threat with respect to gun violence, and by the same token, a different kind of security at schools that sometimes feels oppressive, like metal detectors.
Yeah, that was mainly the main thing, like the metal detectors. How like in all of these schools, like in Bronx and Brooklyn, like every school has metal detectors, because of the gang activity and all of that. But like still, like how is it that we have metal detectors and they didn't? Because I feel like it could have been prevented without metal detectors. The fact that somebody can just walk up in there and with a rifle like that and just like do what they wish. And it's like also we were like kind of feeling like kind of glad that they started this movement, because like we have been talking about this for a long time, like about gun control and how we need these stricter laws that can stop these mass shootings. And that school being a very privileged school, them like creating this platform for us to also step up there and join them is important, because it gives us a voice. And like when we were in the rally, like it was very powerful for us to be there and feel like we had that voice, feel like we had that platform. So that was also another factor about this movement being started, even though it was started in that way, and we've been talking about it for a year.
Yeah. So do you feel conflicted at all by the threat of gun violence leading to this kind of protest movement for school safety? That's what it is. It's a protest movement so kids feel safe in their schools.
Yeah.
But what they did institute in some of the schools for safety from guns, metal detectors, students are protesting against.
Against metal detectors?
Right? So do you feel conflicted? Like there's the thing that they were putting in to protect you from guns being snuck into schools.
Yeah, I definitely
and people don't like that.
Yeah, my cousin, she went to a school that had metal detectors, and she really didn't like the process of going through it, because it was just, you feel criminalized right away with metal detectors and like accused of having weapons on you, and it's just it's very nerve-wracking and frustrating. And I understand why they're conflicted with the metal detectors, but the only way to not have metal detectors is to not have, military rifles, to have these weapons that can kill so many people at once. That's the only way, to be honest. It's one or the other.
Kristine, go ahead.
I would, just to add on to that, I think also in the subject is that, like she was saying, kids do feel criminalized again, in the neighborhoods. We're talking about people of color.
Yeah.
So I think the kids, what they're trying to say is they want to feel inclusive. If you were talking about safety, include us, and it should be the same way in every school. It shouldn't just be in people of color schools where you're putting metal detectors versus kids that are privileged. I don't think that's fair, and I think that's what kids are trying to say, is that if we're going to talk about safety, it needs to go the same for every school. It should look the same, rather.
Now, viewers, of course, high school students protested the war in Vietnam back in the 60s and 70s, in addition to the college-age students, many of whom were facing the military draft. So this isn't the first high school and college-age student-led protest movement in our country's history or in the lifetimes of many people alive today. But when we think of the civil rights movement, we're as likely to remember young people as victims of racism and violence, in addition to them being activists. For example, Emmett Till, lynched in Mississippi in 1955. The 4 young girls murdered in the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham. Those and so many other outrages helped to fuel the civil rights movement. One inspiring example of activism was the organizer of a student strike in 1951. At the age of 16, Barbara Rose Johns had enough of her inadequate, separate, and very unequal high school in Farmville, Virginia, and she took action that had national reverberations. John's story is well told in the book, If We Could Change the World, Young People and America's Long Struggle for Racial Equality, written by Brigham Young University history professor Rebecca DeSchweinitz, who we reached yesterday via Skype.
Probably my favorite example of this is Barbara Johns, who in 1951 is 16 years old. She's a high school student, and she's been watching for months as her parents and other community leaders have been pushing unsuccessfully to try to improve conditions in the segregated and decidedly unequal Black schools of the area. And she's frustrated. You know, they're getting nowhere. They're going through the usual channels and just being given empty promises, and nothing is happening. And she comes to think that, you know, this is about her life, about her opportunities, and she wants to try something new. So she comes up with this idea of a student strike, and she enlists the help of student council and club leaders. And they come up with a plan, and they make picket signs, and they orchestrate a school assembly and have their principal called away so that he can't interfere and stop what they have planned. They approach their peers at this assembly and tell them what they have in mind with the student strike. And there's a school walkout, and the kids go on strike in order to bring attention and try to address the problems of these unequal conditions in their school. Adults find out about this. Their parents are nervous. They don't know what's going to happen. And Barbara Johns convinces them at mass meetings to go ahead and support them. I love one of the quotes from her, from one of these mass meetings. She talks about how our parents ask us to follow them. But in some instances, a little child shall lead them. And then she goes on to say, we knew we had to do it for ourselves. And I think that this quote really kind of captures that notion of childhood innocence, that young people are not supposed to have to be involved in political issues like that. But it also captures kind of her sense of herself and her relationship to this issue, that this is her fight, and that she and other young people like herself are determined to do something about it. And if adults are not going to be successful, they're going to come up with something new. She and her peers enlist the help of the NAACP. They get legal counsel. They take their case all the way to the Supreme Court, and it becomes one of 5 cases that's decided in the 1954 Brown ruling, the important Supreme Court decision in 1954 that desegregated public schools.
Great story. History professor Rebecca DeSchweinitz. Barbara Johns' contribution is not forgotten in Virginia. The statue of her and the other student strikers and their lawyers stands in the state capitol in Richmond. And I don't know if you all could see the print. Maybe it was small on our monitor in here, what it said in that still photo. It seemed like we were reaching for the moon. Does it seem like that, Yasmeen, at all to you today?
I feel like it's closer than we think, to be honest, because like we're so connected than we think. Like I guess the millennials and us and our generation, like we kind of almost desire the same things, like, and especially with this movement, like, because we've seen the history with gun violence and all of that. So I feel like just with a bit more push, a bit more effort, and once we start getting the power, getting the seats, getting the people who we want to actually represent us, then it will we'll be closer to our goal. And then once we get there, then we'll have more goals to get closer to.
Zoe, are you that optimistic?
Well, I think that Yasmeen is absolutely right, but it's only going to happen if we are matching this energy with concrete activism. So it is fantastic that students are walking out, fantastic that there's going to be this march, but we need to match those protests with some type of sustained activism. And what my organization has often done, and what we're doing tonight, is we're trying to train students in how to call their representatives, how to write formal emails, how to ask for what they want, and make sure that their voices are amplified across the entire political system.
Are you any more jaded being 10 years older than these guys and at it for this long and seeing the slow progress?
Yeah, let me just say, I'm still in the motion, because now I teach kids now, and one thing that I'm teaching them is they have, like right now, especially a lot of my seniors, I'm like, get out and vote, because this is a crucial time. This is midterm elections, and I always put them in their minds, in their heads, saying, you guys have the power to change this, because at the end of the day, the representatives and the legislators, we don't work for them, they work for us. So it's time to put people into office that are actually going to serve you and give you the justice that you deserve, and make sure that you are completely safe.
Watching that video, that history professor, I'm curious how connected any of you feel to previous generations' youth movements. Zoe, are you aware of what we heard about civil rights movement right there, or some of the Vietnam era stuff?
Yeah, well, actually, just this week I was reading about the Vietnam War protests in history, and we were reading about the protest, the chant, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" And I was reading that, and I thought in my head, well, LBJ rhymes with NRA, so we started. We used that today at our protest, and I think that was a nice link to those past protests.
How about for you, Yasmeen?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Is it a new idea for you that students were doing this in past generations? The civil rights movement, student-led to some degree. The anti-Vietnam War protests, students were so involved. Are you feeling connected for that, or is this new to you, this particular history?
No, it's not new. It's not going to be new, because the civil rights movement caused an extreme change, at least for me and for my family members and my friends and all of that. So it's not new, and it will never be new. It's going to continue, because there's more things that we still have to tackle.
Just when adults start to feel that kids are disconnected, they don't know anything, like we knew once upon a time, all this false nostalgia, then the next generation rises up.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is about passing the torch. I sat here, I did my time, I'm still out there and in the movement, but it's also just passing that torch to younger people, because they're gonna be out doing the movement longer than I will, And it's so important just to continue raising that voice. Yes, older people are probably gonna be like, you don't know better, but there's an evolution. There's something that's always going to be constantly changing, and that is their narrative. Each generation has their own narrative.
How about the people who are on the other side of this? Maybe not so much at your high school in Manhattan, or where you went in the city, or at SUNY where you go in Westchester, but there are people around the country who they might want to protest for their constitutional rights, and they're talking about Second Amendment gun rights.
Well, there's absolutely that perspective out there, but we have seen as students how violence can enter our classrooms, and how this is an issue for us, and we are going to continue to talk about our experiences and our reality on this issue, and no matter what other perspectives there are out there, no matter whether or not people tell us to stop, we have to keep on advocating for a future that we want in our classrooms.
Have you known anybody who's more kind of pro-gun?
In my school, yeah, I purchased, because there's a mixture of, kids coming down, like up from the South and stuff like that. But I feel like, I'm gonna be real and just say, like, there's no need for these military weapons. So, like, if the most reason that they give of why they want their right to bear arms is because they want to protect their home, they want to protect their family, and maybe they go hunting and stuff like that. But you don't need a weapon that can kill so many people to protect your house. Like, a whole group of 200 people aren't gonna come up in your house to rob you or something like that. So it's like, without them, like, there wouldn't be, you know, all of this happening.
And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the Second Amendment does not actually protect assault weapons.
Yeah.
It protects the right to bear arms in general, but the Supreme Court has already ruled that states have the right under the Constitution to place reasonable limits on that, including limiting the size of magazines, limiting the kinds of assault weapons that people use for the legitimate purposes of defense in their homes or hunting. The Constitution does not protect AR-15s.
I mean, honestly, like the narrative of the NRA is to install fear and create more profit for their use. So obviously in the Constitution, like you said, it doesn't talk about assault weapons. You know, we have to keep our assault weapons. Absolutely not. It talks about arms, and arms could be multiple weapons. You know, so I think it's just really understanding what that Second Amendment is and really talking about coming into the middle to say what is safety. And for sure, I know 74% of people that are home gun owners, they do believe in gun control. So why are we still here having this debate?
You're organizing for the March for Our Lives on March 24th. You all are in one way or another. Are you afraid that social media and the prevalence of social media makes a lot of people feel like they can just tweet or go on Instagram or Snapchat, wherever, and they've done their part without actually physically showing up?
I actually have found the exact opposite. I think that social media has been an incredible organizing tool. So we put together an event tonight, and we put out a Facebook event for it, and we were expecting it to sort of resonate with our network, but all of a sudden people were sharing it, and out of nowhere, people that we had never connected with before were able to have access to information about our event, and were able to hear about us through that. And I think that so much of the protests that have happened are actually, a lot of their credit should be given to social media.
Yasmeen, any different view or more of the same?
It's more of the same, because I feel like social media is a really big help, because, you know, the videos we put out there, they spread to other people. And even if, like, I know there's a lot of fake news, and, you know, somebody can easily read like a fake story based on the protest and like be like, oh, you know, it's very violent, it's cruel, da da da. But as long as what we're putting out there is real and is true, and, you know, people who are willing to actually research it and, you know, actually watch it and see what we're doing, then, you know, it's perfect.
Kristine, why don't you finish up by just telling people about your program and where they can get more information if they want to participate or know people who might want to.
Yeah, so people could reach us at New Yorkers Against Gun Violence website at nyagv.org. One of the special programs that we have a C3 and a C4, which is an education program. We have a C4 for legislative and policy, but on our C3...
That's two different kinds of nonprofit groups.
Yes.
One is for education, one is for politics.
Right, for policy, legislative work. So for our education program, we go around New York City into multiple high schools, and right now we're currently with a middle school as well. We have a 40-page curriculum where we are invested in the school from September to June to talk and reduce gun violence through education and advocacy.
Thank you all so much for coming in, especially on this day when you were so busy already with the activities of this day. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And that's our program for today. We're here each week at this hour at the intersection of city politics and everyday life. Do tune in to my radio program, 10 a.m. till noon, weekdays on WNYC 93.9 FM and AM 820. Tomorrow, your calls for the new Speaker of the City Council, Corey Johnson. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.